I'm Kevin Craven.
I'm Brandon Alexander, and this is Vibeable,
where we invite you to tune in and catch a vibe. Okay, Brandon, what is happening? What is going on?
At the moment, I'm hanging out in the conference room, chatting to my best bud over here.
Good.
Just enjoying some iced coffee. Yeah. Just keeping it simple this morning. How about you?
I am good. I didn't sleep so well last night, but I do feel good. I feel energized despite of. So I'm happy. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be talking with you. I don't drink coffee, but if it's an iced coffee and it has like a ton of sugar in it, I will get up in that.
There's no sugar in this iced coffee, but they do make it with like this maple. It's not maple syrup. It really isn't sweet, but you can taste the maple.
Just like a maple flavor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I typically. I guess it depends on the day. It depends on a lot of things, whether I take my coffee black or with cream or sweet or not. But This is an occasion where it's great as is, no sweetener or creamer needed.
All right, nice. I love that for you.
Thanks. I love it for me too.
Good.
Me, myself, and my taste buds agree with you.
Good. I love it. Yeah. I love it.
So there's a couple things that we were wanting to get to as far as what's been going on in the world.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that were on your mind?
Well, last night was the official teaser release of the live action, if you will, Little Mermaid. They call it live action, but it's still very animated. Obviously, it's underwater, so there's only so much you can do live. But oh my, I really, man, I know I asked you to watch it. Yeah, I have so many thoughts. And
okay, well, let me say my three things that I noticed, and then I really want to get into detail as far as what the experience was like for you, because I know this means a lot. This means a lot to you, and it means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just the things that I mean, no negative things to say about it. I love the teaser. I love. Disney's so great at that just the magic of life, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the homage to the original. I mean, the way that circular shape comes through, with the sunlight kind of twinkling on the other side.
Yeah.
Just a lot of imagery from the original, the animated version that I was just happy to see. Yeah. So
good.
Good. Okay. So now, were you anticipating this drop? Like, did you know it was happening? And at 12 o'clock, you were ready for it, or how'd you come upon it?
So it was dropped before midnight. Like, I knew.
Okay.
Halle Bailey on Twitter said that it would be coming out this week. I didn't know when exactly. So I saw it on Twitter. I saw no, wait. Let me get this right. I forget where I saw it first, but I saw the image. I think it was on YouTube, where I was on YouTube and I saw the image and I was like, whoa, like everyone just needed to stop. Like the entire world just needed to stop for a bit while I gathered myself. So because I found out Halle Bailey, like the rest of the world, would be playing Ariel. Halle Bailey, we first know her as one of Beyonce's artists. She was in a duo, and she's still a part of a duo with her sister Chloe and Halle. And when I first found out that she would be playing Ariel, my mind was blown, because I was a huge fan of Chloe and Halle, and I just didn't expect, Disney to cast her, this black girl with locks at that. I never ever thought that would happen. So I watched the trailer or the teaser is what they called it, and I got so emotional. I got so emotional. I was trying to keep it together, but also I wanted myself to just feel what I was feeling. And I want to explain why I got it so emotional. So when Halle Bailey was first casted as Ariel, there was a lot of backlash from a lot of people, a lot of racists, just, saying stupid shit like "not my Ariel," hashtag "not my Ariel," and I'm like, this is a fictional character, first of all. And this is a very young black woman, or you know what, she's a very young woman, so we have to keep that in mind, despite our beliefs, despite our, I guess, if you have hate in your heart, then you don't really care. But if you have any sort of human decency, please keep in mind that this is a young woman. She is still learning a lot in this world. She is in an industry that picks you apart as it is, where the spotlight is on you. You're signed to Beyonce, so she already has so much to take into consideration. So I'm just like, please, like, be mindful of what you say about her. I know she's a strong woman, but still, just like, it's so important for people to be mindful of how we speak on others, especially in a public setting. Like, I personally never comment. Like, if I don't like a video, and I've sent you videos that I just despise, like, of different like different things that I feel like aren't the most creative, but I would never leave a comment saying anything negative on someone else's video. I just don't believe in that. Like, I believe, like, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. Like, I'll say it to my friends or privately, but I'm not going to say it in their comments. So Halle has been dealing with a lot of this publicly, a lot of scrutiny. So when I saw this, I was just so proud that she took on this role and she nailed that shit. I mean, obviously we only got a clip, but that snippet of Part of Your World, that shit fucking, I'm sorry, pardon me, I just couldn't keep it together. and aside from that, like, all of the black women in my life who are my age or older never had this growing up. Ariel was white. You had Snow White, you had Sleeping Beauty, all white princesses. It wasn't until later that we got Princess Tiana from The Princess and the Frog, and we did have Princess Jasmine, right? But even aside from Disney, in the media, you saw mostly white women representing, regular people. And seeing Halle as Ariel and knowing that so many young girls of color will be able to more easily see themselves in this type of role, it really, oh man.
Aww.
It really just, it really touches me,
Yeah.
And she has locks,
And this is something that I feel like in white culture, it can go kind of by the wayside and just not understood. That it's maybe people are aware, right, that that black and brown people of this country are not represented in the day-to-day things that we see in the media and film and TV. But I feel like there's an incapability of understanding just how big a burden that is. Like, what psychological damage is happening to young people who don't see themselves represented, in the media and in creative things, and what does that do to a young person's self-confidence? And so, yeah, I think it's we've talked about it before. It's progress, certainly too late or later than it needed to be. But I think it's wonderful to be able to witness such a big milestone.
It's going to be big. It's going to do very well. It's going to perform well in theaters, and I'm very excited. And it's, as you were insinuating, it's long overdue. So I'm very proud of Halle. She's so brave, and she's taking on a burden, whether she realizes it or not. I wouldn't say a burden, but she's taking on a responsibility as a role model to a lot of young girls. So, yeah.
And I guess we're anticipating this to break like all the box office records. So it'll be great to see the build up leading up to the release, and then just finally being able to see it and seeing the impact that it'll have. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah,
I noticed that when Disney posted the video last night on YouTube, they turned the comments off, and I think that speaks volumes.
Interesting.
I think it speaks so many volumes, and I feel like in ways they're protecting Halle. It's just really unfortunate because there are a lot of people who have positive things to say, but I also know that it's going to be some dumbass bitches who got some negative shit to say. So I feel like they're protecting her.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like I guess they can be protecting their starlet as well as like it could be protecting her and then also acting in their self-interest. I guess both
definitely
aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it's I hope sooner than later you can look back on this time and just realize just how ridiculous that not too long from now you can look back and just say what a sad state that it's the case that the comments had to be turned off because we knew of the vitriol and the negative comments that would come and that we had to take these steps to protect somebody. Simply because of race. It's just, it's awful because it sounds cliche and it sounds played out, but truth is the truth. And I feel like the people in power want that. They want us to be tired of having to repeat these issues.
We have to move past them eventually, and people just need to get over themselves.
But until then, let's keep the energy up and bringing these issues to the forefront.
Yes, let's keep the energy up, as you said, and let's look at this as celebratory for Halle Bailey and for Disney for casting a Black princess. So, this is celebratory.
Absolutely, and on the celebratory note and mood. There was an article in the New York Times this past week about the Obama's portraits that were finally released. I think like 6 years after being painted.
Was that a little shade at the end?
6 years. For anyone who cares or might have wanted them not, that's a little crazy. 6 years. Oh boy.
Yeah.
And It's cool. It's interesting because the article talks about the artists and then having to maintain that confidentiality for that long. Because the tradition is that the new president invites their predecessor for the unveiling. But no, Mr. Trump just never scheduled the ceremony.
It just didn't happen.
The Times they do their best to be more balanced perhaps than others, and so they did point out that likely Biden will also not extend that courtesy to Mr. Trump.
Well, if you look at it, Biden had to schedule Obama's. Like, someone had to do it. So is he going to do two president portrait viewings? Like, it's like, look, I can't do everything.
Nope. We reached the annual quota of the one unveiling. Sorry.
Yeah, like. Oh man, what a mess that he didn't schedule. Like, that is so shady. Like, but it's so him, right?
Just a little pouty kid, I'm just not gonna schedule that. How do you like that? Yeah.
It is like a little fucking pouty kid. Like, girl,
it is, but you know what? 6 years is fine. Is fine to wait if it meant that someone that meant something to the Obamas and respects them was the one to kind of lead the ceremony. So I'm in that way I'm glad it was Biden. I bet that meant a lot to everyone involved.
Yeah, they're close, and a lot of the Black community often jokingly ignores Obama, Barack, and they just speak on Michelle. So they'll say little things like Michelle Obama and her husband.
But he'd probably be the first one to get in line with that ideology.
Oh, of course. I'm sure he loves it.
Yeah.
And I like, even in this case, I feel like she, like her, when she spoke on her portrait, I feel like she kind of shined a bit more, which she typically does. Just saying how, she wanted this portrait to be a representation of, anyone being able to make it in this country, because that's what it's supposed to be about. Yeah, that's what stood out to me too. I'm so happy that they're always so great at taking like a photo op, effectively is what this was, and making it more meaningful. Photo ops in their world happen several times in a day. So it's awesome that there's still people out there, politicians out there, that are here for the greater good, and they want humanity in this country to do well and succeed. So I thought that was beautiful. Like we were talking about with Disney and The Little Mermaid, and having a more equal representation of the citizens of this country. Ariel in the live action is taking a step in that direction, and so great that these portraits both. I didn't realize that the Smithsonian collection and these portraits that the Obamas had done, which will hang in the White House itself, are different collections, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
But so great that these portraits are on public display, and we can continue to push forth in the progression of just equality.
Yeah, and but was it Barack who said, when he scheduled for Bush's portrait to be revealed, that even with the political differences and the difference in viewpoints when it comes to politics and other topics, it's still just respectful, and it's still just, you kind of see past that, and you honor the president before you, and you fucking schedule it. You just make it happen.
It's crazy. The exact same line stood out to me as well. It was reading the article was to me it was almost nostalgia for a time where politics were a bit more respectful. And I don't know, as a young person, to speak for myself, maybe took it for granted. And I remember joining on the hate George Bush train and calling him an idiot and all this kind of stuff. But the formalities and the respect and the traditions, there's a regalness to it, and there is something to it that was lost after the Trump presidency. So it was nice to read in the article, remembering a time when that happened, and hopefully suggesting perhaps that it's on its way back. Though the article also did mention the possibility of Biden running against Trump in 2024, which brought that knot back to my stomach. But
I'm not looking forward to that, and I totally agree. It was just a tradition, and it was classy, and I feel like feel like there are some traditions that we do need to let go of. But when it comes to having a certain amount of elegance in the White House, when you've been president and you're just honoring the presidents before you, I think that's a tradition that we need to hold on to. And you're right, it got really sloppy with the Trump administration. Like, a lot of shit just got really sloppy. and
a lot of untucked shirts and untied ties just hanging around neck.
Stains on these shirts. Right, let's say what it is.
Stains.
All types of motherfucking sloppy stains on shirts, untucked shirts, undone belts. This shit was ghetto.
Someone get this gentleman a tie pen.
Yeah, no tie pens, very ghetto. Once he took over his administration, like that was the most ratchet presidency I have seen in my lifetime. It was just so ghetto. It was so, I want to say that word specifically because it's not only associated with black people. That shit was fucking ghetto. Ghetto. And when I was living in Middle Village, Queens, during the George Floyd protests in 2020, where I saw all these races, that is the fucking ghetto. Yes. Middle Village, Queens is the motherfucking ghetto. They think they doing something by trying to keep black people out, but no, it's already the fucking ghetto.
Right. And to be clear, ghetto is not a location. It is a mentality.
It
here.
is a
Yeah.
motherfucking mentality in Middle Village, Queens, and the Trump administration is the ghetto.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
I never thought I'd feel so, I don't know, jovial talking about Trump. He
That
usually
felt good,
just,
right?
Triggers disgust. But
Yeah.
this is nice.
That
this is
felt
nice.
good.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
and able to laugh about it,
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
and
man.
it took a minute. It took a minute to be able to laugh about it. And even some listeners might be saying too soon, but at the very least, you and I can chuckle a little bit.
Oh, we can chuckle a lot. Yeah. So moving right along. So you and I both love Meryl Streep and Viola Davis.
Man.
And
Yeah, we do.
I feel like the one time that we had them together on screen isn't talked about enough. And so we don't know if we'll get them on screen together again. Right? Like, I know they're friends behind the scenes, but like to do another film oh my God, that would be so iconic. But the one that we have is already very much iconic. And of course, we are talking about Doubt. The scene with Meryl and Viola. Now, I first saw this. It was released in 2008. I first saw this not long after, maybe 2009. I saw it on DVD, and I didn't realize the greatness that I was witnessing. So,
Yeah.
for the listeners and anyone who has not seen Doubt, Doubt takes place in a Catholic school in the Bronx, New York in autumn of 1964. The scene we'll be getting into features mainly Sister Aloysius, played by Meryl Streep, and Mrs. Miller, played by Viola Davis. Sister Aloysius calls Mrs. Miller in for a meeting about Mrs. Miller's son, Donald. Sister Aloysius suspects that the priest, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, is making advances at Donald, so she wants to inform Donald's mother, Mrs. Miller, on these suspicions.
I'd say that's a great setup for the scene. Yes.
Okay. Now before we dive in, I want to say that before this movie, of course, Meryl was already in icon status. She had done so many movies. She had won an Oscar at that point. And Viola, while she had a long resume, she worked with Denzel and Antoine Fisher. She worked with Jamie Foxx in Law Abiding Citizen. She worked with Richard Gere. She had done Law and Order. She had worked with 50 Cent in Get Rich or Dying Trying. But she had already won her Tony at this point. But she was not, and her Tony was from King Hedley II. But she still wasn't like quite mainstream in Hollywood. She wasn't icon status like Meryl. I feel like after this role and getting her Oscar nomination, this is really what fucking like caused her and allowed her to soar. So and listening to her book recently, she talked about this and meeting Meryl for the first time and how important it was for her and how they talked for hours and ate chocolate. I just love to hear that. But yeah, let's talk about this iconic. It's so good. So good.
It's so great and powerful and moving, like as the picture that you'd sent about how emotional you were about the teaser trailer for Little Mermaid. That's the scene. This scene just gets me, and it just the context of the scene was lost. I saw this when it came out in theaters, and I just didn't remember. I didn't recall what it was that Mrs. Miller is going on about and what her position is on everything that's going on, and it just floored me. Okay, so anyway, more than I remembered, this scene just hit me. It was like pretty impactful. So I want to know your approach, what it is that you liked, your feelings, all the good stuff.
So I feel like this scene just covered a lot of truth, especially in that time period where certain things, like allege advances from an adult to a child were overlooked, especially in like the Black community, because if this meant this child getting a good education to be able to go to a good high school and possibly a better college, then it's like, overlook it, and they definitely highlighted that. And shout out, kudos to the writers. I know this was an original piece. Like, this, what the movie was based on
a play.
Based on a play. So kudos to the writers. But we are talking about the actresses today because it's all about the choices. Like, the writers can only do so much. The actresses in this scene, oh my God. Did you hear that? So disrespectful. Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so just to speak real quick on the writer. So who wrote the screenplay is also, he's the original author of the play, John Patrick Shanley, and he also directed the film. So there's like just a cool connection to the writer. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, like the writing in any film, it's like it's up to the actor. The actor has the script, but they also have choices to make, and the choices that Meryl and Viola made from the time Mrs. Miller, played by Viola, knocked on the door, and Meryl or Mrs. Aloysius Sister Aloysius goes to open the door from putting the light bulb in her office, and Mrs. Miller knocks again, and Meryl is like walking, and she puts her hand up, and she's just like pretty much, I'm coming. Like, it's just the way she walks. It's all of the little fucking choices that are just incredible. Oh man, she opens the door. Viola chooses to kind of give her this look like, oh, I don't really want to be here. There was just like this impatience in her face,
Well, having to get to her, she cleans apartments, so she's really on the clock. I'm guessing she probably is not taking a lunch that day to go to meet with her son's principal.
Yeah. So she hungry. She's a little frustrated here. And then like briefly, I just like Meryl's accent. Like, this accent was, oh my God, she ate it up. She ate that shit up. I don't care what anybody says. She ate it for lunch, period.
Her brown bag lunch.
Yeah. And so Sister Aloysius invites Mrs. Miller in to have a seat, and Mrs. Miller, she's like, well, I'm not sure. For a second, I wasn't sure if I had the dates right because I called it. I didn't get an answer. Then Sister Aloysius is like, oh yeah, I was listening to this radio that I confiscated from a student. And Mrs. Miller, she's like, you like music? And she's like, no. She likes to listen to the news reports because she used to when her husband was in the war in Italy and he was killed. And then Mrs. Miller, Viola, she's like, it's the way she said, you were married? Or you had a husband? I just thought it was like a little shade, like a little bit, like... And then Mrs. Aloysius takes that opportunity, I keep saying Mrs. Sister Aloysius takes that opportunity to mention Mrs. Miller's husband, and asks if he'll be attending this conference, this meeting that they're having. And Mrs. Miller, of course, says no, he couldn't take off work. I myself only have 30 minutes before I got to go back to work. So, yeah. And then, like, Sister Aloysius, Meryl. I'm going to say Meryl because it's Meryl making these choices. She's sitting at the desk, and she's like looking at Mrs. Miller, and she's like, or looking at Viola, and she's like, she wants to get into this heavy topic, but you can see in her actions that she's hesitant. You can see she doesn't really want to get into it. So Mrs. Miller then, takes it upon herself and asks about Donald, how he's doing, what's going on, like, how are his grades? Well, she just asks how he's doing. And and what is that, a Boston accent that Meryl had? Was it like a Boston accent? I don't know. It sounded Boston-y.
Yeah, because it wasn't like New York or anything.
Right. Right.
Yeah, if I had to, it sounded like a Boston to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So she, Sister Aloysius talks about how his grades are average, and he's doing fine. And you also like Viola, like she gives off like she kind of knows like something is like she was obviously brought to the school for a reason, but it's almost like she knows there's something going on, and like in that type of, I don't know, like I'm not gonna say sexually, but in relation to Donald's femininity, I guess. I feel like she there's like this undertone of, I know this is related to my son either being black or being gay or something. So it was just that their body movements and their body actions, like, I don't know, like up until this point, is there anything that like that stood out to you in like during this conversation, like as far as the choices that these actors made?
Yeah, well, it was interesting that you had made the distinction that Meryl is making these choices, and then the thought occurred to me, like, I wonder if Meryl would agree. I wonder if she wouldn't say, well, really, Sister Aloysius is making these choices, because I don't know that she's method, but she also has trouble describing her process, because it's almost a mystery, as much a mystery to her as it is to us. So at the point where you stopped in the scene is about where they are outside walking towards Viola's place of work. Is that right? That's where we've gone up to so far?
No, we're still in the office.
We're still in the office. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I thought that I like the humor that you're finding in that, and I'd have to rewatch, but I could totally see Viola kind of casting shade about, like, her informing her that she was married at some point, her husband died in the war. But I felt that her saying to Meryl's character, "Do you like music?" That was her. I felt like she was called for a meeting, wasn't being. She was getting like a talk around, like Meryl, like you said, Meryl was kind of uncomfortable and as far as how to broach the subject at hand. And so, yeah, I feel like asking if she likes music, which is like a silly question. It's like, well, do you like water? I don't know. Presuming that most people, like music anyway. So like I saw that moment as like her, Viola's character, having to be like I don't know. I feel like she wasn't getting any help from Meryl's character, and so that was just a moment of her trying to make Meryl feel comfortable. Like I felt like she was kind of responding or aware of Meryl's discomfort.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I like that, and I also like the gesture that you had mentioned when Sister Aloysius is answering the door initially.
Yeah.
But then also. There's like an awareness that her character has of like opening this door, and whether it's just a person or whether she was considering that it is a black woman that's in front of her, that she was holding this like stick, with like, it's like the tool attachment at the top, but it could seem pointy and maybe could be like she made an effort to explain what she was doing as to why she's holding this thing, and I thought maybe that was an initial attempt at Sister Aloysius to make Mom feel comfortable, even as awkward as it may have come off. So
okay,
yeah, so up to this point, these are the things I've noticed.
Yeah. Okay. So then we have Mrs. Miller. She mentions Father Flynn and how Father Flynn looks out for Donald. And then immediately after, Viola had like this awkward pause. And that's what makes me believe that she kind of like had an inkling of what this meeting was about. Like it was just like this, like I don't know what that choice was for, but it just makes me believe that Mrs. Miller kind of knew what time it was.
Yeah.
So then we were interrupted in this conversation, and okay, when Mrs. Miller mentioned Father Flynn, you of course see Sister Aloysius, just still uncomfortable and like, oh Lord, here we go, we're gonna get into this, and then we get the knock on the door by the student Jimmy, who was sent down to the office by Sister James, played by the incredible Amy Adams. And like, I know we're not talking about Amy, but I just want to say that Amy ate this shit up. She ate
she also they all killed it equally. It is just
they all ate. Didn't leave no crumbs.
The acting talent it's like savage. It's savage.
It is savage, right? Like, and so
yes.
like before this scene, Amy sent Jimmy down to the office, and Amy or Sister James, and she was fed up. Like, she was getting to a point where she was frustrated because she was having her doubts about Father Flynn, and she was like, I'm tired of these badass kids trying me. And so she called on Mrs. Miller's son, Donald, to answer a question, and he didn't know. And so Jimmy next to him answered for Donald, and Sister James was tired of that shit. She was like, go to the office. She said, I'm tired of this shit. She didn't say that, but she was like, look. She said, go down to the office. I did not call on you. And she, at this point, or leading up to this, Sister James's character was mostly just like this mild character. She was not, she wasn't yelling. She was very patient with the students, but I feel like she was as frustrated as Sister Aloysius in trying to figure out Father Flynn. So back downstairs at Sister Aloysius' office, where we have Jimmy, who is knocking on the door. Meryl opens the door, and she's like, what are you doing here? Or something like that. And he said, Sister James sent me down. And she said, for what?
For talking.
Yeah. He said, for talking. She said, well, go back upstairs and shut up. Like, this is all in front of Mrs. Miller. So Sister Aloysius is like, look, I don't care anymore. Like, I'm trying to talk to this lady, and y'all interrupted my conversation. Just this accent that Meryl has. Just like the impatience. It's just so good. And then while this is happening, we see Father Flynn come in the background behind Jimmy because he's curious to hear what's going on. And he then sees that Mrs. Miller is in the office with Sister Aloysius. And you see that look of concern on Philip Seymour Hoffman's face. And he knows that Sister Aloysius is after him. She is on his ass trying to take him out. And he knows that this...
To put it lightly, yes.
Yeah, to put it lightly. And so Meryl didn't even like say anything to him. She just kind of like peeked around the door as she was closing it.
Just closes it slowly.
Yeah. Just closing the door. That was so funny. And like Mrs. Miller, Viola's still sitting in the chair. We see that she sees Father Flynn as well.
Yes, right.
And she's also just kind of like, okay, this meeting is probably about him. Like she's witnessing the interaction between Sister Aloysius and Father Flynn and how they aren't really like engaging too much. So I definitely feel like at that point, Mrs. Miller knew what was going on.
So, if I may just comment on that scene with Sister James in the classroom. So, I feel like some subtext of that scene as to why did Jimmy answer for Donald? Is it Donald?
Yeah. Donald.
Yeah. And so they're altar boys together, and so I feel like Jimmy has insight that Donald has as far as the nature of Father Flynn.
Yes.
So I feel like in that moment he was protecting his friend. He knew that his friend is stressed, like what his friend is going through, what Donald is actually going through, and so to protect him, rather than letting him just sit in silence, not knowing the answer, or rather he was being called out for not knowing even the question. Jimmy speaks out to protect his friend, which gets him in trouble, which sends him down. It's great writing because that's the inciting action. Jimmy going to the principal's office, knocking on the door, which prompts Meryl to open the door, which then prompts her to see Father Flynn in that moment, and Mrs. Miller also to see Father Flynn. But then we also get this moment when Jimmy is leaving where he gives Father Flynn a bit of attitude. And there's no connection between Father Flynn and the infraction of speaking in class, right? Yet he gives attitude, which might suggest further that Jimmy has insight as to what has happened between Donald and Father Flynn.
Yes, you're right, because Jimmy asked what was going on, and Father Flynn kind of said, nothing, go back to class, and then Jimmy was like, bullshit, under his breath.
Right, yes, exactly.
He's like, what'd you say? He said, nothing. I like that. You're right. Jimmy definitely... he called bullshit, so he knew that wasn't the truth. So we cut back to Sister Aloysius and Mrs. Miller. Sister Aloysius offers to walk Mrs. Miller to work so that they can continue their conversation where they can have some privacy, I assume. So we cut to outside, and I just want to say that the way Viola is walking and holding her umbrella as she speaks, it's almost like she's pleading with her body posture. Like it was like she was just kind of like pleading, and it was like she just had like this, I don't know, like almost these nerves that she was taking on because she knew where this conversation was going. Sister Aloysius starts talking about, Donald more, and if Sister Miller knows Father Flynn. Mrs. Miller says, a little bit. I've seen him during mass, but I haven't met him face to face. And, Viola is like just blinking a lot. I noticed, like, you can tell she's just so nervous, or Mrs. Miller is so nervous. And, Meryl mentions her concern, and then she closes her eyes for a bit and stops Viola from walking. And I wonder, like, how much of this, like, was planned, or if they were just, like, in that shit, where they're walking and she's like, look, I need to talk to you about something. And she couldn't make eye contact with Mrs. Miller, though. Like, you could tell she had to tell her, like, this character had to say something really important, or something she was nervous about bringing up. Their chemistry is just so, their chemistry together for their first time working together, it's so good. Then after Sister Aloysius mentions her concern about Father Flynn making not passes, I forget what she said, advances at Donald. Then Mrs. Miller asks, are you sure? Is there any evidence? And Sister Aloysius says, no, there's no evidence. And then Mrs. Miller says, then maybe there's nothing to it. So she walks away. Meryl looks at her in concern and begins walking with her as she's staring at her. She's staring at Viola the whole time. Meryl almost speaks, another choice here. She almost speaks, you see, and then she stops and then says, I think there is something to it. And there were moments when Meryl was talking when she looked Viola like up and down. She was just like kind of just like looking at her like up and down her whole body, almost like she was trying to figure her out. Like, again, the choices here are just
Yeah, and you're describing a moment for a character where we've seen up to this point in this up to this conversation with Mrs. Miller, she has everyone figured out. She's the best chess player in the room, and now here you go, and she is not getting the responses she, I guess, came to expect from Mrs. Miller. Right, This is someone who isn't necessarily challenging her, but you can see in this moment that Meryl's character is having to work through a perspective that she probably didn't realize even ever existed. As far as you think it's not just right and wrong, we have to stop this. There are other things at play that Mrs. Miller is having to consider.
Yes. She's thrown off. She's like, oh, this isn't going the way I thought it would go. So at this point, Viola tone changes. And she gets more serious when she says she doesn't want to get into it. And Meryl just looks really concerned, and she's looking at the ground, Meryl, and she's trying to figure this out, as you just said, trying to figure out Mrs. Miller, almost like she expected. This is like, I wrote this down and you just said it, like almost like she expected Mrs. Miller to react a certain way and she didn't. So now she's trying to figure out what, how to get her on her side, pretty much, to take out Father Flynn, to take him down. So there was the moment when Mrs. Miller, Viola, was saying that her son's not to blame. And Meryl started talking over her, saying, "You need to listen to me," all while Viola is still talking. And she's still walking too. And I'm wondering if it was meant to be that way, with them talking over each other. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I know there is a lot of improv in with filming and scripts. I know that there's often a lot of improv, and I just wonder how much of this was improv and how much of it was the script.
Well, to speculate alongside with you, seeing as many interviews as I've seen of the two, and as much behind the scenes footage as I've gotten my hands on between the two's work respectively, I feel like their process would have allowed a conversation, at least between the actors, certainly between the actors and the director, well, who is also the writer. So that's a great resource to have. And especially since it's a unique position that the director / writer has, first of all, created the material, and second of all, spent so much time, right? It was a whole other production, a whole other Broadway production of other actors exploring the same scene and the same moments, right? But of course, these two actresses have different things to bring to the table. So I feel like a conversation of like dialogue and how it would flow would certainly have come up. So, I mean, I would say that I can see it being more likely that they had that conversation of, I think you should step on my words a little bit, or that what my character is feeling, I think I might interrupt you or speak on top of you, kind of thing. But I mean, also those two are in the like there's so many micro things that tell me that Meryl is not on screen, that it is Sister Aloysius that I am watching, and so I can totally believe if they made those choices in the moment as well.
Yeah, where they totally got lost, and they were like, "We are these people. We are these two women."
Right.
They're talking over each other. And oh my God, sorry.
They've got us just so moved.
I'm so moved.
Get those emotions out of here.
Bye. So Mrs. Miller says that Father Flynn has the position. You don't go up against a man like him. He has the position. And then Sister Aloysius, Meryl says, and he's got your son. And then what really threw Mrs. Aloysius off is when Mrs. Miller responds, then let him have him then. And the tone. The tone, the desperation in Viola's voice. Like, oh my God.
Which prompts Meryl to ask, what kind of mother are you? Like, it shocks her so much that this could possibly be a mother's response. Yeah,
she, like, Meryl at that point tilts her head a little bit, and then she leans in toward Viola, and she's just like so thrown off. And then Viola, or Mrs. Miller, reiterates, because she said this earlier in the conversation, it's just till June. It's like, please, like, just let what's happening happen until June. And she's taking like these anxious deep breaths, Viola, like over and over, just more signs of desperation, it's the let him have him is just, it says so much. It just says, it's so deep. It's saying a lot here.
Yeah. And that line of, it's so, man. Yeah, I feel like I'm realizing, I realized it in the moment just how great the actual material that we're watching is. But really getting a chance to deep dive into it, you're really appreciating, like, this is a gifted writer, right? So this is a moment that the characters as well as the audience are, and like you can totally, it's adapted from a play, and you can totally see that this works really, really, really well on stage.
Yes.
Right? It's just these mostly just duets, just two people on screen saying wonderful dialogue.
Yeah.
And so when Meryl says that, like, she can't believe that Viola would say something like that. And like, what kind of mother are you? Viola's response, Isabella's response is, excuse me, but you don't know enough about life to say a thing like that.
Oof. She did. She did.
You know, and I feel like that's commentary on the Karens of the world, or anyone who might suggest that the hardships of any immigrant or brown or black person in this country has the equal opportunity and should be equally viewed as anyone's opportunities in this country. Like, you don't know. You might know the rules, and you might be able to quote how society should be, but you don't know enough about life. I think what she's saying is, you don't know enough about my life and about people like me, and how our stories play out in comparison to, right? Meryl's just, there's something wrong, there's justice to be meted out, and I'm going to get it, and we're going to move on. And that's, I feel like that's always been Sister Aloysius's way.
That was all. Yeah, that was all she was trying to like get here, and it got to the point where Meryl screams, I know. She said, I am right about, and she was, referring to Father Flynn.
Declares, yes.
Yeah, she's like, it doesn't matter your experience or what you know about love. I am right. So it was more about Sister Aloysius' ego at this point. She just wanted to be right. And then Meryl backs up as she's asking, what kind of mother are you? And they start walking again, where there's more desperation in Viola's voice, and now there's tears. Like, Viola starts crying. Like, you see the tears in her eyes at this point. Meryl begins walking behind her, eagerly trying to make her point of being right about Father Flynn. Meryl's tone also becomes more desperate and emotional, I notice. She grabs Viola's arm while she's talking. There's a lot of desperation from both of them at this point. They both Mrs. Miller's like, look, I just want a better future for my son. Sister Aloysius is like, I just want to be right about this man. I want him gone. There's a lot of desperation. She wanted badly to convince Mrs. Miller to respond the way she wanted her to. Viola screams that maybe some of these boys want to get caught, which is also just another line, which is like, whoa, like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Which sets Sister Aloysius back, takes her aback, right? In her response after that, like, what is it that you're trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Right? That's what she says?
Yeah. I mean, just...
And it's crazy because that is the moment, right? So both of them have been tiptoeing around the issue. Though different issues up until they didn't realize it was different issues. Meryl on the accusations against the priest, and then Viola having to be open and honest about her son's sexuality.
Yeah. And what I forgot to mention was Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller's husband. He would beat Donald because he knew he was gay and he knew he was feminine, and he didn't even want him to go to this school, St. Nicholas. They didn't want to send him to a public school because they felt like the boys would have killed him because he's just so different. And, so Mrs. Miller is like taking on, or I'll say Viola is taking on Mrs. Miller's burden of having to consider her son, having to consider her husband, like wanting a better future for her son while protecting him from her husband. It's like, it was a lot that this woman was dealing with. And then she's taking on the burden of possibly, having Sister Aloysius kick Donald out of the school, which would just also be horrible. Yeah, oh my God. Viola looks around almost with regret that she said that so loud, where she said maybe some of these boys want to be caught, and there's still all these nerves, and just, I guess, considering people would have heard that and wonder what was going on. So Viola's just like looking around and nervous and crying, and we know Viola is not afraid to ugly cry, by the way. Like, we know she's a snotty crier, and she is not afraid to just get in it. Like, she's not afraid to just like, look, whatever happens while I'm crying, it's gonna fucking happen. And I also want to point out, this is Viola's first ever scene with someone she like worshipped. You know, other than Cicely Tyson, Meryl was one of Viola's like biggest influences to become an actress. And Viola is holding her fucking ground. Like she's like, look, I'm here, bitch. Like, I'm gonna do this shit. And she did it. Like, she is acting with Meryl. Like, she is bringing it. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, just crazy. And then the end of the scene, Meryl is shaking her head in denial because this is not going the way she wanted it to. Looking away as Viola or Mrs. Miller is talking. Meryl's body movements, turning away, looking away, no eye contact as she threatens to throw Donald out. It's almost as if she knew that she didn't want to do that. She knew she didn't want to throw Donald out, but she figured it would help in, you know, changing Mrs. Miller's mind, possibly. So she needed that leverage, and she mentioned throwing Donald out. And Mrs. Miller ends with, you know, well, I choose to be on my son's side, sister. I hope you are on this side too. I hope to see you there. And she goes back to work. And this iconic scene is, oh my God, so good.
So I can definitely share in that. I mean, the film as it is, there's plenty of moments in that film that have me emotional, outside of the context of the text and the words and the story. It's just watching actors do beautiful, beautiful work. So I thought that there were several turning points. You had mentioned a couple moments where there was like a shift in tone or a shift in attention. Yeah. But I thought an interesting one. So I had mentioned it in the beginning. So how I said that this scene hit me harder than I recall it ever being. And so for that moment for me is when I realize, and then perhaps Meryl as well at the same time is realizing what the actual position of Mrs. Miller is, right? And so Viola says, I'm talking about the boy's nature now. She is specific to say that I'm talking about his nature. This is not about theft. This is not about any action that he's done. And she says, not anything he's done. You can't hold a child responsible for what God gave him to be.
Yes. Oh, I just got chills.
God gave him me too. For what God gave him to be. Oh. It's like that line in itself. So you said that this takes place in the 60s. Like this encapsulates what was going on. I mean, I guess it was happening in the world at large to some degree, but specifically the gay riots and all that in New York. And I feel like that is what it is. So this is the 60s. There's still more people religious than not. And this is someone who is religious, who is putting the onus on God, not her son. It's not her son's fault. How could he be responsible for what God gave him to be? Oh, wow. That line. Oh, that line is.
I'm still getting chills.
So, I mean, and then so what hit me is one how eloquently and powerful that one sentence is, and then what comes after that is what broke my heart. You know, she's saying with regards to this man who is showing affection and attention to her son, do I need to ask if he's a good person? And that's not a concern of hers. Yeah. You know, she doesn't care if he's good or not. Yeah. She sees what her son is and that he is gay and that he is different. And whether this person, this adult male, is good or not, it's more important to Viola's character that her son have a male who can positively accept this part of her son. Yes. Which
he treats him good, she
It blew it, and you know what? It personifies like a mother, right? That is a fucking stance that a mom who loves and will do all the things for her kid. Like that is what Viola is doing in this moment.
Wow. And
and she's even thankful. And thank God this educated man with some kindness in him wants to do just that, to give my son attention. I mean,
and of course you believed her. You believed her.
right? And just, I mean, that is the stance that, like, that is the best that this mother has come across in her life for her son is heartbreaking. And then to see Meryl's character, who had never ever once considered that there was more to the story, right? She just assumed that the mom would want to take him down.
Yeah.
But this whole other thing, whether it's harming her son in the long run, is not her concern. That he has a positive role model, and that the homosexual parts of her son, that to say who her son is as a person, is perpetuated in a positive way. That was the most important to her, and that was just. I really can't think of another instance in film or TV or fucking any plays that I've seen that demonstrate the will of a mom like that. It's just so powerful. So powerful, and it just feels so real. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't music underscored to have it be more dramatic and have it land. This is scoreless. The wind in the background and these two actors, you know?
Oh, there was no music. Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. It was just them carrying this scene.
Yo.
Oh,
Yeah.
like it was like the emotion was on them. You know, a lot of music is cued to kind of, you know, I guess I'll say inflict emotion, a certain type of emotion, but like the emotion was coming from these actresses. You are so right. That's such a good point. Wow. Yeah, that she was this mother who just wanted her son to get into a good high school and to get into a good college. And if that means that he has an adult male friend, if you will, then listen, like, this is what we got to do. This is my life, sister. You don't know my life. Don't tell me about my life. Oh my God. I just wish I could have like been there with them. Like I just wanted to feel that, you know, magic.
I often think that whenever there's like a scene in a movie where the star, the Viola, the Meryl of the film has like a moment like that, and it's in front of people or extras or other people have to populate the area in which the scene is happening. And I love imagining being an extra and getting to fucking witness that shit. Like to be feet away and watch the performance. Yeah. I mean, there were people who walked by in that scene very sparsely, but just even the crew, the other people present that got to witness that performance.
Oof. At this point, they probably didn't know who Viola was and was like, oh, well, we get to see Meryl, but little did you know.
That's right. And the one other little piece of information that I thought was maybe pertinent to the scene. So in the beginning of the film, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character says that doubt can be a bond as powerful and sustaining as certainty.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's some truth to that, right? I mean, the doubt that Sister Aloysius has, you know, is she declares it a certainty, actually, right? And that within that very scene, I am right. But then, of course, at the end of the movie, she admits that it is just doubt, that it is not certainty. Yeah. But I mean, that the two are effectively the same or can affect a situation or people in the same way. I thought was interesting and something that I likely missed when I saw it in theaters.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie that you gather more and more Easter eggs from the more you watch it, and even more just like lessons that you learn and you hear, and just the brilliance that is Philip Seymour Hoffman and Amy Adams, and just what a fucking cast this was. Like what there will never be another. There will obviously we don't have Philip anymore. You know, it's just...
I miss that man, yeah.
The chemistry of all of these actors. And I love that Meryl and Viola are actually friends. A few years ago when Meryl was being honored at the Oscars, she got Viola to introduce her. And what a beautiful introduction it was. And when they were going head to head with each other at the Oscars for, I believe it's the Iron Lady and The Help that Viola did. And Meryl won, and as she was going up to accept the award, she touches Viola's face, and it's just so, their relationship is just so beautiful. When Viola got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, it was Meryl who came and spoke on her. I really just admire them so very much. I love their chemistry. I'm so glad they did this movie together. So good. Even if just for a short 7-minute scene, it was incredible.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy that is the time limit there, because we've spent, as however long the episode has been till now, breaking it down. Like, there's, in a 7-minute scene, like a lifetime's worth of information to digest and break down and take in. Yeah.
Definitely. Just so beautifully done, so beautifully thought out, or not, according to Meryl. Maybe she didn't think about it. Maybe she just went in and did it.
Right.
So iconic, and I do hope that we get them on screen again at least one more time. They're both so busy. Viola's Woman King did come out. I would love to maybe have a conversation about that at some point. Meryl's always busy.
It's just a matter of when. Of course, we're gonna. I mean, did we talk about that? I think we did.
We did talk about the trailer.
I'm psyched. Yeah. I'm excited to see that film.
Me too.
And do you know what? Do we know what Meryl's next project is? Not that she needs to do any work ever again.
I don't.
Hopefully, she has many, many, many more projects for us.
Yeah, I'm sure she's working on something. I'm sure she is.
She's a busy lady.
She's even in her 70s. She's a very busy lady. And
bless her.
I love Meryl because she treats people good. Viola said that on the set of Doubt, she treated her she treated her like they were friends. She treated her like, it wasn't like this arrogance or this ego, and they got along and they chatted, and look, now they're friends. They're actual friends. And Meryl has that reputation in Hollywood where she's just down. Like, she's like, look, I'm Meryl fucking Streep, but like, whatever. Like, yeah, what a scene, and what a discussion. This type of discussion about this one particular scene. As you said, there's always something new to cover, and I'm glad we got to cover it today. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Me too. Anytime we have talent such as the level of Meryl Streep and Viola Davis, it's an honor and a pleasure to get to break down the work that they've done, to appreciate the work that they've done, hopefully expose listeners or anyone who's not seen a film like Doubt. Certainly check it out. I mean, the topics are certainly timely and relevant, and if you're a fan of film, you won't be disappointed. You will not. Yeah, so thank you for tuning in, listeners. If you are not already, go and follow us on Instagram, Vibeable Podcast. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. We have a new episode out every Friday. We'll see you next time. Or you'll hear us next time. You'll hear, right, hear. Hear you later. Bye. Hear us later. Bye. This has been Vibeable. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.